40% off, including the authors that are reading tonight. We also have our humongous annual Clear the Shelves sale going on right now. And so there's different areas of the store, mainly these 2 wooden trucks that are labeled with what kinds of discounts there are. I won't take up any more time describing those, but just holler if you have questions about what's on sale. Okay, so I am now going to introduce our special guest, David Odle. David Odle discovered his love for writing at the age of 13 while growing up in Warren County, Indiana. After 7 years in the military and over 13 years as an IT consultant living in Austin, he's back living in Indiana with his wife and 5 children, and he's finalizing his next novel. Please welcome David Odle.
Of course, it's not as accurate as it used to be, because now it's his wife and 4 children, because the other one moved to Austin. Right here. This is the first time doing this, and it was such a huge crowd. I'm gonna try to speak so that everybody can hear it. But this is actually a better showing than the last one because 3 people showed up in Brown County. So, but we had a hell of a good time. A couple of things on this book. For one, it's urban fantasy, and it is pretty genre specific. So, if you like urban fantasy being wizards and whatnot, then you'll like this one. The one that's coming out next, which is now scheduled for late spring of next year, into the summer, it's a little bit more paranormal and deals a lot more from a military PTSD perspective. So a lot of people kind of like it. It's a little bit more deep on the character side, so looking forward to that. But Marcus is definitely genre specific, so if you like these kinds of stories, Patricia Briggs, Karen Moaning, the stories like that, then I think that you'll enjoy this one. So, and I know Ian has to leave. I'm talking like I don't know people sitting here.
I was expecting to hear the whole book, so go ahead, get it.
Oh yeah, you'd be so excited. But I did want to, I picked out a chapter out of this. I was aiming for something that had a little bit of action in it, so that way we don't all start nodding off. But also something that kind of give you an idea of the flavor of the book. And so I would say that as far as urban fantasy goes, my style is not the same style as what you would probably read in this genre. So it is written a little bit different than maybe what you would get before. And to kind of set the stage, also by the way, on your first publication, you turn in like a 500-page novel, and then they tell you cut this down to like 113 pages. And so you really have to get very surgical with this thing. So, so it does move along pretty quickly. And so to just set the scene, the other thing I got to do is I got to give Mike credit, because Mike actually read the very first version of this book. It's been a few years ago. He's the one that gave all of the critique and really formed it into what it became. Yeah, I owe him quite a bit. You know, his name's in the back. So. But anyway, to set the stage, so that Marcus, clearly the main character of the book, it is going to be I don't want to say a series of books, but it's a continuation of characters. And so Marcus, being that main character, is a very, very old man. He's dying. He's got cancer. He's ready to hang things up. And it just turns out there happens to be a really mean bad guy. He just happens to be the only person that can kill him. And so he has to kind of come out and take on one more battle before he dies. And so in this scene of the book, which is a little later on in the book, his kind of small band of good guys are stuck in this house. They're hiding. They've been discovered, and what they're trying to figure out is, do they need to run, or are they in a position where they're just going to have to fight their way out? And so the story's actually written from the perspective of Alexis, which is the kind of the female lead in the story, who also happens to be a witch. So here we go. I practiced this. So I'm hoping I don't screw it up too If they attack us, they'll come all at once, Alexis said. She stepped carefully down the wooden steps and kept one arm hooked around Liam's elbow. She felt better, but not great. Not by a long shot. That goddamn Michael. She hoped to meet that son of a bitch again, and soon. A dull pain just above her navel still lingered. Not an ache, but more of a pull, which bothered her. Something could still be wrong in them. She glanced at Marcus. Indeed they will, he said, scanning the tree line. Both of his hands rested on the top of his cane. Just as she and Liam left the last step, she heard the car, thank God. She gripped Liam's arm tighter. She liked him. She liked him a lot. But she hated that he was here. If anything happened to him, that guilt would be hers and hers alone. And she didn't need that shit in her life. Not now. Not ever. They'd need to drop him somewhere and get him out of all of this, despite his objections, or anyone else's for that matter. Still, she guiltily loved the feel of his arm, of his muscle beneath the shirt. And most lovely was how he regarded her. He'd bravely stand between her and danger. She knew he would, because that's the kind of guy he was. Were there still men like that in the world? Men who would sacrifice for things greater than themselves. Her eyes crawled back to Marcus. Yes, she thought that there were. Headlights splashed across the trees lining the driveway. It would be full dark soon. They had to keep moving. She and Liam hustled out to the edge of a short sidewalk. They're not coming yet, Marcus said. The clunk of his wooden cane against the boards of the porch told her he was coming down behind them. They're waiting. Waiting for what? Liam looked over his shoulder at Marcus. Nathaniel would be my guess, Marcus said. I assumed he was pursuing Christopher, but there's no other reason why the wolves would wait. Nathaniel's the bad guy, in case you want to know. Great, that guy again, Marcus. Liam said. Marcus said, not sure I'd call him a guy. Alexis coughed hard and covered her mouth with her fist. She anticipated the ensuing pain inside her and braced for its wrath, but it never came. Thank God for that. Won't they attack us once they see we're leaving? Oh yes, Marcus stated, as if everyone should know. They'll try to stop us at least. How the hell did they find us, Liam asked. I don't know, Marcus said. The car shot out from behind the shed and barreled down the driveway, slinging gravel and throwing up a cloud of dust. Strange, but she sensed something in Marcus, a hesitancy. His eyes never drifted from the wood line as the car stopped abruptly next to him. What's wrong, she asked him. Marcus's eyebrows shot up, and he cast a sideways glance at her. You won't like it. There's a lot I don't like. She said the words confidently enough. At least she thought she did, but in the back of her mind, she wasn't sure she wanted his answer. Marcus shifted his gaze back to the trees. I don't think we should run. They're waiting, which means Nathaniel is not here yet. Was he thinking of fighting them? Of course he is. This is what Marcus does. Liam popped open the door and swung it open to an empty back seat. Be careful with her, Liam. Philip was twisted around with one hand on the steering wheel and was looking at her. Oh, Philip, she thought. Liam said, just be ready to haul ass out of here. Just then, a screeching howl, followed by a deep-throated grumble, drifted from the trees. It was too dark to see clearly as everything took on varying shades of gray. She'd heard that noise before and knew it all too well. Goosebumps broke out on her arms. Let's go. Marcus opened the front door and climbed in with a grunt, apparently deciding not to stay and fight it out, which she was just fine with. She ducked down and slid delicately across the seat. Liam shuffled in behind her and slammed the door shut. Can she do it?
No, go for it. She got your headphones.
Philip jammed the accelerator, and the rear tires spun in the loose gravel. The car inched forward, catching traction with painful slowness. She dug her fingers into the leather seat and cinched her arm around Liam's. Liam muttered, oh, holy shit. She followed his gaze out the window. Huge creatures, their heads low to the ground, charged from the trees across the field. Even in the dim light, she could see the open mouths, the wide eyes, and the thin frames reminding her of giant hyenas. God, how she hated them. The car crept along, still seeking traction, spewing gravel in a shower behind them. Here they come. Alexis gripped the seat in front of her. Marcus said, stop the car, Philip. We're not going to make it. What? Philip gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Are you fucking crazy? The car stopped abruptly and the engine shut off. Alexis felt Marcus's magic seeping out of him, and taking control of everything. He rested his wrinkled hand on the dashboard. I think it's about time we show them what we can do. Marcus calmly opened the door and got out. Just before he closed it, he ducked his head back in and said, "Stay in the car." The door banged shut and he was gone. Philip yelled something about getting out of here with Marcus's name peppered in here and there. Liam muttered, "Oh, Jesus Christ," while staring out the window with eyes wide and one hand pressed on the glass. She thought, "God damn it, Marcus." She clenched her hand tight on her belly and slid across the seat. It didn't hurt as bad now. She opened the door. "You guys do not get out of this car," she said. She didn't wait for their response. She got out and shut them safely inside. He had a hunch she'd join him. She braced herself against the back fender and breathed heavily, almost gasping. Marcus glanced at her. "Try to calm down," he said. The wolves bore down, a few hundred yards away and closing in. Their maddened growls drifted across the field. "It's not the wolves that worry me, Alexis," he said, turning back to face the onslaught. "I know," she said. "If Nathaniel has already arrived and brought his legions, this may not be a long fight." The wolves were within 100 yards. "I don't think he's here yet," she said. "They're coming after us because we're leaving." He nodded. He agreed. 50 yards. She reached out and gripped his long coat. Marcus was fine with that. "We're surrounded." Marcus gripped her shoulder and pulled her close to him. "Keep your aim true." 20 yards. She tensed. Marcus let go of her. He needed both hands free for this. Through clenched teeth, he said, "Show them no mercy." Marcus thrust his arms forward as if pushing a drunk out of his face, and Alexis felt the air shudder, followed by a large crack. A thin ribbon of blue light shot out in a circle and fanned away like a concussion ring of an explosion. Behind them, the car rocked in squeaky protest, and the rocks of the driveway peeled up in a wake. The wolves didn't make it another inch. The ring of light collided with them, shearing them in half, slicing chunks of flesh from their grotesque bodies. The entire first wave blew apart and showered those behind them with blood and bone. She turned toward the house. Hordes of wolves assailed from that direction. As Marcus's deadly light streamed toward them, they fell flat on the ground and allowed the light to pass over them, then scrambled back to their feet and continued the assault. She glanced over at Marcus. His attention was focused on the ones coming from the woods. She stepped to the back of the car and placed her hand on the cool metal of the trunk to steady herself. Marcus's light ring hit the house and it burst into flames and collapsed in a roar of crushing wood and bursting glass. She lifted her hand, palm facing the wolves, and concentrated. The dull pain in her stomach throbbed. She clenched her teeth and squeezed her eyes. It was payback time. The air danced in waving mirages as the heat rose. It was all coming back to her and it felt so good. She forced her energy forward like pushing a boulder. Then the air ignited in a fury of flames that would have made Satan himself proud. Marcus watched her as he moved away from him, as she moved away from him. Her bout with Michael had rattled her confidence. Marcus needed her back, and for a witch or wizard, that meant getting back into the heat of battle with both guns blazing. Now, don't let her hurt herself, you old bastard. He also knew this was no ordinary enemy for her. It was the wolves, and her loathing ran deep for them. To his front, the wolves advanced, though this time far more cautiously. They reared tall on their back legs, circling in anticipation, inching their way closer, and so far, no Nathaniel. Not yet. The fight needed to end before he arrived. There was a good chance Christopher escaped, much to Marcus's delight. The little bald guy had survived so far. If Alexis had another day or two for recovery, they'd be a force to be reckoned with. Time to wrap this shit up. Marcus raised his arm and brought it down in front of him, splaying his fingers as if he had just passed a football. The wolves leapt at him, but it was too late. A sparkling ball of blue light shot into them like a comet. The wolves in the front disintegrated, their wide eyes taking in the surety of their deaths a split second before they melted into a cloud of ash. The ones further back dove away, but their efforts proved just as futile. He turned to Alexis as she collapsed against the side of the car. Wolves plunged through her weakening fire. The creatures charged, their fur singed and smoking, their teeth bearing a triumphant snarl. Alexis screamed, but Marcus sensed fury in that sound, not fear. He stepped up next to her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. At least he hoped it was comforting. It was her hatred that was exhausting her, not the fire. He leaned close to her ear and said, "It's magic, Alexis, and it comes He stretched out his hand toward the wolves. Sometimes it helps to say the words out loud. He slipped his other arm around her, pulling her closer and bearing her weight. As the wolves descended, he said, "Fold them." Lightning erupted from his fingers and split as if striking a prism, and each spear sought a target with deadly precision. His skin thrummed as the energy surged through him. The small hairs of his arm and neck stirred and danced. What didn't feel natural at all was his thudding heart. Not something he'd ever experienced before, and he wasn't exactly sure what to think of it. He heard scuffling in the gravel behind him. He spun and faced a wolf leaping at him, soaring into the air across the car's top. He threw up a wall of fire, like a thick ribbon twisting and turning in a fanciful dance to unheard music. The wolf struck it and fell back onto its side, ripping in the gravel and clutching its face. The remaining wolf pack stopped at the edge of the yard, their comrade dead in the driveway. Marcus's ribbon of fire elongated and stretched high into the air, where it lingered like an apparition, and then descended rapidly onto the pack. The flames spread out like a blanket, swallowing everything that moved, even as the desperate creatures tried to escape back into the trees. Just as quickly as it had started, the attack was over. The stream of lightning sputtered out and the fire dissipated and faded to nothing. Smoldering bodies littered the ground, fanned out in a massive circle around them. Marcus stared at the severed head of a wolf, one glassy eye opened wide and the other shut. For the first time in his life, a wave of dizziness swept over him. What the hell was that? His heart slammed against his ribs, and he could feel the blood throbbing in his neck and fingertips. He stood still, not sure what else to do. His body regained composure, but it imprinted a feeling on him that he'd never forget. Marcus glared back toward the woods. In the darkness, he could see their deformed frames, ghostly illuminated by the rising moon. And none of them moved any closer. They stared at him, some shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. "Come, Alexis." Marcus reached down to help her. She took his hand. "We've got to go. Nathaniel may be on his way here, and we're best not to fight him in pitch black." Marcus grimaced as Alexis used his hand to pull herself up. "How fast can he travel?" She reached the back door of the car. "Fast enough," Marcus said. He actually didn't know for sure. Alexis glanced at him, her soft green eyes opened wide and perfect, and Marcus, for just a second, found himself lost in them. His wrinkled skin might as well have been silk, and the cancer killing him was forgotten. For that brief moment, Marcus Blue was as good as he had ever been. A smile, one that appeared both forced and genuine, touched her lips. Marcus's eyes stung, and he blinked away tears that threatened to spill down his cheeks. "Get a hold of yourself, old man. Everyone dies, even warlocks." It seemed cruel that God allowed vampires the gift of immortality. He didn't want to die. He no longer accepted the inevitable truth as just another page in the book of time. His magic struck the fear in the souls of those who opposed him, but despite everything he could do, there was nothing, not a damn thing, to stop the rot in his own body. He smiled back at her, hoping she couldn't detect the hurt behind the effort. "I'm glad to see you've still got it." She touched his arm and then climbed carefully into the car. Marcus shut the door behind her and took one last look at the wolves. He debated pursuing them and finishing the job, but decided that he and his small band of survivors would be better served getting out of here. The wolves, at least these wolves, were no longer a threat. He opened his door and climbed in, flopping down in his seat. "Are we ready to get out of here, gentlemen?" Philip didn't move at first, as if in a trance, and then shifted the car into drive and began to roll forward. Finally, he spoke. "I've never seen anything like that." Marcus looked back at Liam, who stared at him with eyes big enough to lay a $50 coin on the eyeball and never touch his eyelid. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked. Liam nodded but didn't speak. The car picked up speed, but Marcus noticed the slight tremble in Philip's hand, as well as the thin bead of sweat that gleamed on his forehead. He'd settle down soon enough. "Where are we going now?" Philip asked. "We need to get to a small town in Nebraska called Rice's Crossing," Marcus said. "Nebraska?" Philip's lip curled. "Yes, it's another hiding place." Marcus coughed into his fist. "Let's hope it's a little more hidden than the last one." The house in Rice's Crossing was owned by Christopher alone, and to Marcus's knowledge, it was only he and Christopher that knew about it. "Nebraska." Philip shook his head. "How are we supposed to get there?" Marcus leaned back in his seat and eased his eyes closed. He didn't feel well. "Just drive, Philip. Do not stop driving." "Is that the closest one we've got?" "There's no hiding places closer." "Of course there are, Philip, but we're going to that one." Marcus didn't have the energy to explain further. Marcus popped his eyes open. Jesus Christ, now what? Marcus squinted out the windshield and peered through the clearing dust. He saw an old Ford pickup truck parked in the road. Someone stood in front of it, staring back at them. This was goddamn strange. Marcus never shifted his gaze from the shadowy figure and said, "Be ready to go. No one get out of this car." And he opened his door and got out. Wasn't that awesome? Chapter 30. If you kind of get a sense for the book, you get a sense of how the characters interact and the things that they do. I've never been a huge fan, ironically, of urban fantasy. There are some that I really like, but this is my take on that particular genre, and I think it's a fun genre if you can write it right. So.
Thanks, Dave.